There's a moment, just before you die, when the world sharpens. Every sound, every color, every heartbeat becomes painfully clear. Some people say their life flashes before their eyes. Others say time slows down, stretching each second into an eternity. But for those who survive, who claw their way back from the edge, what stays with them isn't the fear or the pain. It's the memory of that clarity, the knowledge that they were one breath away from never coming back. I've spent years collecting stories from people who escaped death by a hair's breadth. Some of them are ordinary car accidents, medical emergencies, freak accidents that could happen to anyone. Others are stranger, harder to explain, the kind of stories that make you question what's real and what's possible. But all of them have one thing in common: the moment when survival became a choice, a fight, or a miracle. This is not a list of statistics or a compilation of headlines. These are the true stories of people who looked death in the face and lived to tell about it. Some of them are my friends. Some are strangers who reached out after hearing I was collecting these tales. All of them are survivors. Story 1: The Night the City Burned. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd run into a burning building. I always imagined myself as the cautious type, the one who double-checks the stove, who keeps a fire extinguisher under the sink, who plans escape routes in hotel rooms. But on the night the city burned, all of that went out the window. It started with a siren, distant at first, then growing louder as it echoed down the narrow streets of my neighborhood. I was sitting on my couch, half watching the news, when the power flickered and died. The world outside my window glowed orange, and for a moment I thought it was just the sunset reflected off the glass. But then I heard the shouting. I opened the door and stepped into chaos. Smoke rolled down the street in thick, choking waves. Neighbors ran past, some carrying children, others dragging suitcases or pets. The air was filled with the sound of breaking glass, the distant roar of flames, and the sharp, metallic clang of fire engines trying to force their way through the gridlocked traffic. I should have run. I should have grabbed my phone, my wallet, and gotten as far away as possible. But as I turned to lock my door, I heard a voice, a child's voice, high and panicked, coming from the apartment next door. "Mom, Mom, I can't get out." Without thinking, I ran toward the sound. The hallway was already filled with smoke, thick and oily, stinging my eyes and throat. I dropped to my knees, crawling along the floor, feeling my way by touch. The door to the apartment was hot under my hand, but I pushed it open anyway. Inside, the world was a blur of heat and darkness. I could barely see, but I could hear the child crying, somewhere near the back. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, and followed the sound. My hands found a small arm, trembling and slick with sweat. I scooped the child up, cradling her against my chest, and turned back the way I'd come. The hallway was worse now. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see my own hands. I remembered something from a fire safety video. Stay low, keep moving, don't stop. I crawled, dragging the child with me, my lungs burning, my eyes streaming tears. Somewhere behind me, the building groaned, a deep, shuddering sound that made the floor vibrate. I don't remember how I made it outside. One moment I was crawling through darkness. The next I was on the sidewalk, gasping for air, the child still clinging to my neck. People crowded around us. Someone wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. Someone else took the child from my arms. I sat there, shaking, watching as the building burned, flames licking out of the windows, sparks drifting up into the night sky. Later, when the adrenaline wore off, I realized how close I'd come to dying. If I'd hesitated for even a second, if I'd taken the time to grab my phone or shoes, I might not have made it out. The fire department said the building collapsed less than 5 minutes after I escaped. 5 minutes. That's all that separated me from the people who didn't make it. I still dream about that night. Sometimes I wake up smelling smoke, my heart pounding, my hands reaching for a child who isn't there. But I also remember the moment I stepped outside, the rush of cold air, the sound of the child's sobs turning into laughter as she realized she was safe. That's what keeps me going. That's what reminds me that sometimes survival is just a matter of moving forward, one breath at a time. Story 2. Lost in the white silence. The first thing you notice is the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating quiet that comes when the world is buried under snow. I was never afraid of the wilderness. I grew up hiking, camping, learning how to read a map and start a fire. But nothing prepared me for the way the world changes when you're lost in a blizzard. It was supposed to be a simple day hike, just me, my dog, and a trail I'd walked a dozen times before. The sky was clear when I set out, the air crisp and cold, the trees dusted with fresh snow. I made good time, following the trail markers, stopping now and then to let my dog chase after squirrels. The storm came out of nowhere. 1 minute the sky was blue, the next it was a wall of white, snow falling so hard I couldn't see my own footprints. I tried to turn back, but the trail was gone, erased by the wind and snow. My phone had no signal, and the battery was already low from the cold. I told myself not to panic. I'd read enough survival books to know that panic is the enemy. I found a stand of trees, huddled under the branches, and tried to get my bearings. The wind howled, shaking the trees, driving the snow sideways. My dog pressed against my leg, whining, her fur already crusted with ice. I started walking, hoping to find the trail, a road, anything. But the world was a blur of white, every direction the same. My feet went numb, then my hands. I tried to keep moving, but the snow was up to my knees, each step harder than the last. After what felt like hours, I realized I was going in circles. I recognized a fallen tree, half buried in snow, that I'd passed before. My mind started to drift, thoughts slowing down, the cold seeping into my bones. I knew I had to stop, to find shelter before I collapsed. I dug a shallow hole in the snow, curled up with my dog, and pulled my jacket over both of us. I remembered reading that snow can insulate, that it's better to stay put than to wander aimlessly. I tried to stay awake, counting my breaths, listening to the wind. I don't know how long I lay there. Time lost all meaning. At some point, I heard voices, distant, muffled, almost drowned out by the wind. I thought I was dreaming, but then I felt hands pulling me up, wrapping me in blankets, lifting me onto a stretcher. My dog barked, her voice sharp and real, and I knew I was alive. The rescue team said I was less than an hour from freezing to death. If I'd kept walking, I would have missed them. If I'd fallen asleep, I might never have woken up. But I survived, thanks to a few scraps of knowledge, a loyal dog, and a little bit of luck. I used to think drowning would be loud, a struggle, a flailing of arms, a desperate fight for air. But when it happened to me, it was almost peaceful. Almost. It was the last day of summer vacation, and my friends and I had decided to spend it at the lake. The water was cold, but the sun was warm, and we took turns diving off the old wooden dock, seeing who could make the biggest splash. I'd always been a strong swimmer, but that day, I pushed myself further than I should have. We were racing to the buoy, a faded orange marker bobbing in the middle of the lake. I was halfway there when I felt the cramp, a sharp, twisting pain in my calf that made my leg seize up. I tried to keep swimming, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The water felt heavier, thicker, pulling me down. I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the distance and the laughter of my friends. I tried to float, to keep my head above water, but the pain was too much. My arms grew tired, my lungs burned, and the world narrowed to the sound of my own heartbeat. That's when the panic set in. I thrashed, trying to kick, but every movement sent a jolt of pain through my leg. Water filled my mouth, my nose, my eyes. I sank, the sunlight above me turning into a blurry, shifting pattern. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. But then something changed. The panic faded, replaced by a strange calm. The water was cool and quiet, and for a moment, I felt weightless, almost free. I saw shapes moving above me, arms, faces, the flash of sunlight on wet skin. Hands grabbed me, pulling me up, dragging me toward the surface. I coughed, sputtered, gasped for air. My friends hauled me onto the dock, pounding my back, shouting my name. I lay there, shivering, the world spinning around me. Someone wrapped a towel around my shoulders. Someone else pressed a bottle of water into my hand. Later, at the hospital, the doctor told me I was lucky. Another minute underwater, and I might not have made it. My friends had noticed I was missing just in time. They said I was blue when they pulled me out, my lips and fingertips tinged with the color of the lake. I still swim, but I never go out alone. I know now how quickly things can go wrong, how easily a moment of fun can turn into a fight for your life. And I know that sometimes survival is just a matter of being seen, of someone noticing when you disappear beneath the surface. Story 4. The Stranger on the Highway. It was supposed to be a routine drive, just a few hours on the interstate, a quick visit to my parents, and then back home before midnight. I'd made the trip 100 times before, always careful, always alert. But that night, something felt off. The highway was empty, the world outside my headlights a blur of darkness and rain. I kept my hands at 10 and 2, my eyes on the road, but the monotony made my mind wander. I was thinking about work, about bills, about the argument I'd had with my sister the night before. That's when I saw the car. It was parked on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, steam rising from under the hood. As I passed, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the rain, waving their arms, trying to flag me down. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to keep driving, to call for help when I reached the next town. But something made me slow down, pull over, and back up until I was even with the stranded car. The figure was a woman, soaked to the skin, her hair plastered to her face. She looked terrified, her eyes wide and desperate. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "My phone's dead. I've been out here for hours. Can you help me?" I unlocked the passenger door, and she climbed in, shivering. I handed her my phone, and she dialed a number with shaking hands. As she spoke, I glanced at her car, an old sedan. The hood popped, steam still billowing out. Something about the scene felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. She hung up, handed me back my phone, and thanked me. "My brother's on his way," she said. He should be here soon. Can you wait with me? I nodded, trying to hide my unease. We sat in silence, the rain drumming on the roof, the world outside our little bubble of light and warmth. After a few minutes, another car pulled up behind us, headlights cutting through the darkness. "That's him," she said, relief flooding her face. She opened the door and ran to the other car, waving. I watched as she hugged the driver, then turned to wave at me. I waved back, then started my engine and pulled back onto the highway. It wasn't until I was miles down the road that I realized how close I'd come to danger. The next morning, I saw a news report about a series of carjackings on that stretch of highway. The police said the suspects were using a broken-down car as bait, flagging down Good Samaritans and robbing them at gunpoint. I don't know if the woman I helped was one of them, or if I just got lucky. But I do know that sometimes survival is a matter of timing, of trusting your instincts, and of being just cautious enough to keep yourself safe. Story 5. The Rules That Saved My Life. I never believed in superstitions. I was the kind of person who walked under ladders, opened umbrellas indoors, and laughed at the idea of lucky charms. But after what happened to me, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there are rules in this world that we're meant to follow, even if we don't understand why. It started with a new job, a night shift at a small-town motel. The pay was good, the hours were quiet, and the manager seemed nice enough. On my first night, he handed me a list of rules, written in neat, block letters. Never check in a guest after midnight, no matter how much they beg. If the phone rings and no one is on the line, do not answer it a second time. Always keep the lobby lights on, even if the power flickers. If you see a guest in the hallway who doesn't have a room key, do not speak to them. At 3 a.m., lock the front doors and do not open them until sunrise. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of initiation prank. But the manager's face was serious. "Just follow the rules," he said. "You'll be fine." The first few nights were uneventful. I checked in a few travelers, restocked the coffee station, and watched old movies on the lobby TV. But on the fourth night, things changed. At 12:30 a.m., a man knocked on the door, asking for a room. He looked normal enough, tired, a little disheveled, but nothing out of the ordinary. I almost let him in, but the first rule echoed in my mind. I shook my head, apologizing, and watched as he walked away, disappearing into the darkness. At 2 a.m., the phone rang. I picked it up, but there was only static on the line. I hung up, and when it rang again, I let it go to voicemail. At 3 a.m., the power flickered, the lights dimming for a moment before coming back on. I made sure every bulb in the lobby was burning bright, just in case. At 3:15, I saw a woman in the hallway, standing outside room 7. She didn't have a key, and when I tried to speak to her, she turned and walked away, her footsteps making no sound on the carpet. I spent the rest of the night on edge, jumping at every noise, every shadow. When the sun finally rose, I felt like I'd survived something, though I couldn't say what. The manager smiled when I told him about my night. "You followed the rules," he said. "That's all that matters." I still don't know what would have happened if I'd broken one of them. But I do know that sometimes survival is about more than luck or skill. Sometimes it's about listening to the warnings, even when you don't believe in them. The mountains have always called to me. There's something about the silence, the way the world narrows to snow and sky, that makes me feel alive. I've climbed peaks on 3 continents, braved storms and freezing nights, and always come home with stories to tell. But nothing prepared me for the day the mountain almost took me for good. It was late February, and the snowpack was deep, too deep, some said, but I checked the avalanche reports, studied the weather, and felt confident. My partner, Alex, and I set out before dawn, our headlamps cutting tunnels of light through the darkness. The air was sharp, every breath a cloud. We made good time, reaching the ridge just as the sun crested the horizon. The world below us was a sea of white, unbroken except for the dark line of the forest far below. We paused to take in the view, to drink water and share a granola bar, laughing about how we'd have the whole mountain to ourselves. We started down the slope, picking our way carefully, testing the snow with each step. I was ahead, maybe 20 yards, when I heard it, a low, deep rumble, like thunder trapped underground. The snow beneath my feet shifted, then dropped away. I didn't have time to shout. The world tilted, and I was sliding, tumbling, caught in a river of snow and ice. I tried to swim, to keep my head above the surface, but the avalanche was too strong. It pulled me under, spinning me in darkness, filling my mouth and nose with cold, suffocating powder. I remembered the advice from avalanche training. Make a space in front of your face. Try to stay calm. I clawed at the snow, desperate for air, for light, for anything. My chest burned, my arms ached, and just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, the snow stopped moving. I was buried, trapped in silence. I couldn't move my legs, could barely wiggle my fingers. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, to count, to focus on the tiny pocket of air I'd managed to create. Minutes passed, maybe hours. It was impossible to tell. I thought of my family, of Alex, of all the things I'd never get to say. I started to drift, the edges of my mind going soft. Then, faintly, I heard a voice. Alex, shouting my name, the sound muffled but real. I tried to shout back, but my voice was too weak. I pounded on the snow with my fist, hoping, praying that he would hear. Suddenly, light broke through, a shaft of brightness, a gloved hand reaching for me. Alex's face appeared, eyes wide with relief. He dug me out, pulling me into the open air, wrapping me in his arms as I gasped for breath. We sat there for a long time, shivering, holding on to each other. Later, the rescue team said I'd been buried for nearly 20 minutes. Any longer, and I might not have made it. But I did. I survived, and every time I look at the mountains now, I remember how quickly beauty can turn to danger, and how thin the line is between life and death. Story 7. The Hostage. I never thought I'd see the inside of a bank vault, let alone as a hostage. But life has a way of surprising you, sometimes in the worst possible ways. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was standing in line at the bank, waiting to deposit a check. The place was quiet, just a few customers and 2 tellers behind the counter. I was scrolling through my phone, half listening to the soft music playing overhead, when the doors burst open. 2 men in masks stormed in, guns raised, shouting for everyone to get down. The room exploded into chaos, people screaming, dropping to the floor, hands over their heads. I froze, my mind blank, my body refusing to move. One of the men grabbed me, dragging me to my feet. "You," he said, pressing the barrel of his gun to my back. "Open the vault." I stammered that I didn't work there, that I was just a customer, but he didn't care. He shoved me toward the counter. demanding that the tellers open the vault or he'd shoot me. The tellers, pale and shaking, fumbled with the keys, their hands trembling so badly they could barely turn the lock. The next few minutes were a blur of shouting, threats, and fear. The robbers herded us into the vault, locking the door behind us. The air was thick, the walls closing in. Someone sobbed quietly in the corner. I tried to stay calm, to breathe, to think. I remembered something I'd read once about how vaults are airtight, how the air can run out if you're trapped too long. I counted the people, tried to estimate how much time we had. I listened for sounds from outside, hoping for sirens, for rescue. After what felt like hours, the door finally opened. Police officers flooded in, guns drawn, shouting for us to stay down. The robbers were gone, caught trying to escape through the back. We were safe. Later, I learned that the police had been negotiating with the robbers, buying time until they could make their move. If the robbers had panicked, if they decided to use us as leverage, things could have ended very differently. I still have nightmares about that day, the feel of the gun against my back, the sound of the vault door closing. But I also remember the relief, the gratitude, the overwhelming sense of being alive. Sometimes survival is just a matter of waiting, of holding on until help arrives. Story 8. The Fall. I've always been afraid of heights. Even as a kid, I'd get dizzy standing on a chair. So when my friends invited me to go rock climbing, I almost said no. But I didn't want to be the coward, the one who stayed behind. So I went. The climb started with easy, gentle slopes, plenty of handholds, the sun warm on my back. I started to relax, to enjoy the challenge, the view. But as we got higher, the rock face grew steeper, the hold smaller. My heart pounded, my hands slick with sweat. Halfway up, I slipped. My foot missed a ledge, and suddenly I was falling, the world spinning around me. I felt the rope catch, jerking me to a stop, but the force was too much. My harness twisted, and I slammed into the rock, pain exploding in my side. I dangled there, gasping, the ground far below, the sky above. My friends shouted, telling me to hold on, that they were coming. I tried to stay calm, to focus on my breathing, but the pain was overwhelming. Minutes passed, maybe longer. My arms grew weak, my grip slipping. I thought about letting go, about how easy it would be to just fall, to end the fear and the pain. But then I heard my friend's voice, close now, steady and calm. He reached me, clipped me into his harness, and together we made our way down, inch by inch, until my feet touched solid ground. I collapsed, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I'd come so close to giving up, to letting go. But I didn't. I held on, and I survived. Now, when I look up at cliffs or tall buildings, I still feel fear. But I also remember the moment I chose to fight, to hold on, to live. I never liked working nights, but the pay was good and the hours fit my schedule. The warehouse was quiet after midnight, just the hum of the lights and the distant rumble of trucks on the highway. Most nights, I'd listen to music, count inventory, and try not to think about how empty the place felt. One night, everything changed. I was halfway through my shift, scanning barcodes in the back storage area, when I heard a crash. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, echoing through the metal shelves. I paused my music, listening. Silence. I told myself it was nothing, a box slipping, a rat knocking something over. But then I heard it again, closer this time. A scraping sound, like something being dragged across the concrete floor. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the noise, my heart pounding. The warehouse was a maze of shadows, the aisles stretching out in every direction. I called out, but no one answered. As I turned a corner, I saw a movement, a figure, hunched and shuffling, dragging something behind it. For a moment, I thought it was a homeless person, someone who'd broken in looking for shelter. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky and unnatural. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The thing turned, its face hidden in shadow, and let out a low, guttural growl. I stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight, and ran. I didn't stop until I reached the office, slamming the door and locking it behind me. I called security, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. They arrived minutes later, searching the warehouse from top to bottom. They found nothing, no sign of forced entry, no footprints, nothing out of place. I quit the next day. I still don't know what I saw that night, but I know I was lucky to get out. Sometimes, survival is about listening to your instincts, about running when every part of you screams to stay and investigate. Story 10. The Crash. I was driving home from a friend's wedding, the road slick with rain, the world outside my headlights a blur of darkness and water. I was tired, my mind drifting, replaying the night's laughter and music. I should have pulled over, should have waited for the storm to pass. But I just wanted to get home. I rounded a curve and saw the headlights, too close, coming straight at me. I slammed on the brakes, but the car skidded, tires screaming on the wet pavement. The other driver swerved, but it was too late. We collided head-on, metal crumpling, glass shattering, the world exploding into chaos. For a moment, everything was silent. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Pain radiated through my body, sharp and blinding. I heard voices, distant and muffled, someone shouting for help. I faded in and out, the world a blur of flashing lights and sirens. Paramedics pulled me from the wreckage, their hands gentle but urgent. I remember the cold rain on my face, the taste of blood in my mouth. At the hospital, they told me I was lucky. The seatbelt and airbags had saved my life. The other driver was drunk, barely conscious when they pulled him out. He survived, too, but I never saw him again. The scars faded, but the memory stayed. Now, whenever it rains, I slow down. I remember how quickly life can change, how a single moment can mean the difference between going home and never making it back. Story 11. The Diagnosis. I was 27, healthy, and invincible, or so I thought. I'd never been seriously sick, never spent a night in the hospital. But then the headache started, sharp, blinding pain that made it hard to think, to work, to live. I went to the doctor, expecting a prescription, maybe a warning to get more sleep. Instead, I got an MRI, then a call that changed everything. "We found something," the doctor said, his voice careful. "A mass in your brain. We need to operate." The days that followed were a blur of fear and disbelief. Surgery was scheduled for the following week. I spent every night lying awake, imagining all the things I'd never get to do, the people I'd never get to see again. The morning of the surgery, I hugged my family, trying to be brave. The last thing I remember is the bright lights of the operating room, the sound of my heart beating in my ears. When I woke up, everything was different. The pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache and a sense of relief so overwhelming I cried. The doctors said they'd removed the tumor, that it was benign, that I was going to be okay. I got a second chance. Not everyone does. Now, every headache, every ache or pain reminds me of how close I came to losing everything. I don't take my health for granted anymore. I don't take anything for granted. Story 12. The River. I grew up near the river, spent my childhood swimming, fishing, and skipping stones across the water. I knew its currents, its moods, its dangers. But one summer afternoon, I learned just how quickly the river could turn against you. I was out with friends, floating on inner tubes, the sun hot on our faces. The water was high from recent rains, the current faster than usual. We laughed, splashing each other, drifting downstream. Suddenly, I was caught in a whirlpool, the water pulling me under. I tried to fight, to swim to the surface, but the current was too strong. I tumbled, spinning, my lungs burning, the world a blur of bubbles and light. I thought of my family, of all the things I'd never get to say. I stopped fighting, letting the water take me. Then, just as suddenly, I was free. The current spat me out downstream, tossing me onto a sandbar. I lay there, coughing, gasping for air, the sun blinding in my eyes. My friends found me minutes later, their faces pale with fear. I was bruised, shaken, but alive. Now, whenever I see the river, I remember that day. I respect its power, its unpredictability. I know how quickly a moment of fun can become a fight for your life. Story 13. The Firefighter's Test. I always wanted to be a firefighter. There was something about the idea of running toward danger, of saving lives, that called to me. The training was tough, but I loved every minute of it. The camaraderie, the adrenaline, the sense of purpose. My first real fire was a warehouse blaze on the edge of town. The building was old, filled with chemicals and machinery, a maze of corridors and storage rooms. We arrived to find flames pouring from the windows, black smoke billowing into the sky. We suited up, checked our gear, and went in. The heat was like a wall, pressing against my skin even through the protective suit. My mask fogged up, making it hard to see. I followed my captain, staying close, listening for instructions. We found a man trapped in an office, coughing, his face streaked with soot. The captain told me to get him out while he checked the rest of the floor. I grabbed the man's arm, guiding him through the smoke, counting steps, feeling my way along the wall. Suddenly, the ceiling collapsed behind us, blocking our path. The heat intensified, the air thick with smoke and dust. I radioed for help, my voice shaking. "We're trapped. I need a way out." The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady. "Stay low. Find a window. Help is on the way." I crawled, dragging the man with me, searching for any sign of light. My air tank was running low, my lungs burning. I thought about giving up, about lying down and letting the darkness take me. But then I saw it, a faint glow, the outline of a window. I smashed it with my helmet, the glass shattering, cool air rushing in. I pushed the man through, then climbed out after him, collapsing on the ground outside. The other firefighters found us minutes later. The building was engulfed, flames roaring through the roof. I'd made it out with seconds to spare. Now, every time I suit up, I remember that day. I remember how close I came to not making it home. And I remember why I do this job, not for the thrill, but for the chance to give someone else another day. Story 14. The Plane That Didn't Crash. I've always been a nervous flyer. Every bump, every jolt of turbulence sends my heart racing. But I never let it stop me from traveling, from seeing the world. One flight, though, changed everything. We were halfway across the Atlantic, the cabin lights dimmed, most passengers asleep. I was reading, trying to ignore the turbulence, when the plane suddenly dropped, hard. People screamed. Drinks flew. The overhead bins popped open. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seat belts. We're experiencing some unexpected turbulence." The plane shook, rattling so hard I thought the wings would snap off. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles white, my breath coming in short gasps. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The plane leveled out, the lights flickered, and the captain spoke again. "We've regained control. Please remain seated." Later, we learned that a sudden downdraft had caused the drop, that the pilots had fought to keep the plane steady. We landed safely, but I couldn't stop shaking. I still fly, but I always listen to the safety briefing, always keep my seat belt fastened, and always say a silent prayer before takeoff. I know now how quickly things can go wrong, how close we all are to the edge. Story 15. The mugging. It was late, the city streets empty except for the occasional car or stray cat. I was walking home from a friend's apartment, my headphones in, my mind elsewhere. I didn't see the man until he was right in front of me, blocking my path. He was tall, wearing a hood, his face hidden in shadow. He pulled a knife, his voice low and threatening. "Wallet." Now. My heart pounded, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my wallet. I handed it over, trying not to look at him, trying not to make any sudden moves. He grabbed it, then lunged, grabbing my arm. I twisted, breaking free, and ran. I heard footsteps behind me, the sound of his breath, the knife flashing in the streetlight. I turned a corner, ducked into an alley, and hid behind a dumpster, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I heard him run past, cursing, his footsteps fading into the night. I waited, heart pounding, until I was sure he was gone. Then I made my way home, locking the door behind me, shaking so hard I could barely stand. I reported the mugging to the police, but they never found him. I was lucky, just a few bruises, a lost wallet, and a story to tell. But I know now how quickly things can turn, how close I came to not making it home. Story 16. The lightning strike. I was hiking in the mountains, the sky clear, the air fresh. I didn't notice the storm clouds gathering until it was too late. The first rumble of thunder made me pause, looking up at the darkening sky. I picked up my pace, hoping to make it back to the trailhead before the rain started. But the storm moved faster than I did. The wind picked up, the sky turned black, and rain began to fall in sheets. I was still a mile from my car when the lightning started, jagged bolts splitting the sky, thunder shaking the ground. I ran, heart pounding, the hair on my arms standing on end. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash, a deafening crack, and I was thrown to the ground. For a moment, I couldn't move. My ears rang, my vision blurred. I smelled burning, felt a strange tingling in my limbs. I lay there, rain pouring down, until I could move again. I stumbled to my feet, dazed, and made my way back to the car. At the hospital, they told me I'd been lucky. The lightning had struck a tree nearby, the current traveling through the ground and into me. I had burns on my legs, but I was alive. Now, whenever I see a storm, I remember that day. I respect the power of nature, the unpredictability of life. I know how close I came to being just another statistic. Story 17. The subway incident. I've always loved the city, the energy, the noise, the endless movement. The subway was part of my daily routine, a place where I could zone out, listen to music, and watch the world go by. But one morning, everything changed. It was rush hour, the platform crowded with commuters. I was standing near the edge, waiting for my train, when I felt a sudden shove from behind. For a split second, I was airborne, falling toward the tracks. Time slowed. I saw the rails rushing up to meet me and heard the distant roar of the approaching train. I twisted, reaching for anything to grab, my mind blank with terror. A hand caught my arm, strong and steady, yanking me back onto the platform. I landed hard, my knees scraping against the concrete. The train thundered past, so close I could feel the wind on my face. I looked up to see a stranger, breathless, his eyes wide with shock. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping me to my feet. I nodded, too shaken to speak. The crowd parted around us, some people staring, others pretending not to notice. The man who'd pushed me was gone, lost in the sea of faces. I never found out who saved me, never got to thank him. But I think about him every time I step onto a subway platform, every time I feel the rush of air as a train approaches. I know how quickly life can change, how a single moment can mean the difference between life and death. Story 18. The Tornado. Growing up in the Midwest, tornado warnings were a part of life. We'd hear the sirens, grab our emergency kits, and huddle in the basement, waiting for the storm to pass. Most of the time, nothing happened. But one night, everything changed. The sky turned green, the air heavy and still. The sirens wailed, louder than I'd ever heard. My family and I rushed to the basement, grabbing flashlights and blankets. We could hear the wind howling, the house shaking, windows rattling in their frames. Then came the roar, a sound like a freight train, so loud it drowned out everything else. The walls trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. I clung to my mother, my heart pounding, certain the house would collapse. It felt like hours, but it was only minutes. The noise faded, replaced by an eerie silence. We emerged to find our neighborhood unrecognizable, houses flattened, trees uprooted, debris scattered everywhere. Our house was damaged, but still standing. Some of our neighbors weren't so lucky. We spent the next few days helping each other, clearing debris, sharing food and water. The next few days helping each other, clearing debris, sharing food and water. I still have nightmares about that night, the sound of the tornado, the fear in my mother's eyes. But I also remember the kindness of strangers, the strength of my community. Sometimes, survival is about more than just luck. It's about coming together, helping each other through the worst. Story 19. The Choking. It happened at a family dinner, of all places. We were celebrating my father's birthday, the table crowded with food and laughter. I was telling a story, gesturing with my fork, when a piece of steak lodged in my throat. At first, I thought it was nothing, a cough, a sip of water, and it would pass. But the food wouldn't budge. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Panic set in, my vision narrowing, the world spinning. My mother noticed first, her face going pale. She shouted for help, and my brother jumped up, wrapping his arms around me. He performed the Heimlich maneuver, squeezing hard, again and again. Finally, the piece of steak flew out, landing on the table. I gasped, sucking in air, tears streaming down my face. The room erupted in relieved laughter, but I was shaking, my hands trembling. I hugged my brother, thanking him over and over. I'd come so close to dying, right there in the middle of my family. Now, I chew my food more carefully, never taking a bite for granted. I know how quickly a moment of joy can turn into a fight for your life. Story 20. The Flood. The rain had been falling for days, turning the streets into rivers, the fields into lakes. Our town was used to storms, but this one was different, relentless, unending, the water rising higher with every hour. We watched from our windows as the river overflowed, swallowing roads and bridges. The power went out, the sky a constant gray. My family and I packed what we could, moving to the second floor as the water crept up the stairs. That night, the water broke through the front door, rushing in with terrifying force. We climbed onto the roof, huddling together in the rain, watching as our home disappeared beneath the flood. Rescue boats arrived at dawn, their lights cutting through the mist. We were pulled to safety, shivering and soaked, but alive. We lost everything, our home, our belongings, the life we'd built. But we survived. We rebuilt, stronger than before. Now, every time it rains, I remember that night. I remember how quickly the world can change, how important it is to hold on to the people you love. Story 21. The Bear. Camping in the wilderness had always been my escape, a way to disconnect, to find peace in the quiet of the forest. I'd seen wildlife before, deer, foxes, the occasional raccoon, but nothing prepared me for the night I met the bear. I was alone, my tent pitched near a stream, the fire crackling as I cooked dinner. I heard a rustling in the bushes, then a low, guttural growl. I turned to see a massive bear, its eyes reflecting the firelight. I froze, remembering every bit of advice I'd ever heard. Don't run, don't make eye contact, speak in a calm voice. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. The bear moved closer, sniffing the air, its breath steaming in the cold night. I grabbed my bear spray, aiming it at the animal, my finger trembling on the trigger. For a moment, we stared at each other, the world narrowing to just the two of us. Then, with a huff, the bear turned and lumbered away, disappearing into the darkness. I collapsed by the fire, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I'd come so close to death, so close to being just another statistic. Now, every time I camp, I remember that night. I respect the power of nature, the unpredictability of life. I know how quickly things can change. Story 22. The Elevator. I never thought much about elevators. They were just a part of daily life. Pressing a button, waiting for the doors to open, step inside, and let the machine do its work. But one afternoon, everything changed. I was leaving work late, the office building nearly empty. I pressed the button, stepped into the elevator, and hit the ground floor. The doors closed, and the car began its slow descent. Halfway down, the elevator shuddered, then stopped. The lights flickered, then went out, plunging me into darkness. I pressed the emergency button, but there was only static. My phone had no signal. I waited, telling myself it was just a glitch, that help would come soon. But then the elevator dropped, just a few feet, but enough to send my stomach into my throat. The car jerked, the cables groaning above me. Panic set in. I pounded on the doors, shouted for help, but the building was empty. The air grew hot and stale, my breath coming in short gasps. I remembered something I'd read. If the elevator falls, lie flat on the floor to spread out the impact. I lay down, heart racing, waiting for the worst. After what felt like hours, I heard voices, maintenance workers, prying open the doors. Light flooded in, and I was pulled to safety, shaking and drenched in sweat. They said a power surge had caused the malfunction, that I was lucky the emergency brakes had worked. Now, every time I step into an elevator, I remember that day. I know how quickly the ordinary can become dangerous, how close we all are to the edge. Story 23, The Home Invasion. It was a quiet night, the kind where you feel safe, where the world seems small and manageable. I was home alone, curled up on the couch with a book, the windows open to let in the cool breeze. I heard a noise, a soft thump, like something falling. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling, but then I heard it again, closer this time. I got up, heart pounding, and walked toward the kitchen. That's when I saw him, a man, masked, standing in the shadows, a crowbar in his hand. He saw me, and for a moment, we both froze. Then he lunged, grabbing my arm, dragging me toward the back door. I fought, kicking and screaming, my mind blank with terror. I remembered the self-defense class I'd taken years ago. Go for the eyes, the throat, the groin. I twisted, breaking free, and ran for the front door. He chased me, but I made it outside, screaming for help. Neighbors came running, lights flicking on up and down the street. The man disappeared into the night, leaving me shaking on the sidewalk. The police never found him. I changed the locks, installed an alarm, and learned to trust my instincts. I know now how quickly safety can become an illusion, how important it is to be prepared. Story 24, The Cliff. We were hiking along the coast, the trail winding along the edge of a steep cliff. The view was breathtaking, waves crashing against the rocks far below, the sun setting in a blaze of color. I was taking a photo, backing up to get the perfect shot, when my foot slipped. The ground crumbled beneath me, and suddenly I was falling, the world spinning around me. I grabbed at anything, roots, rocks, grass, my fingers scraping against the earth. I managed to catch hold of a small ledge, my body dangling over the void. My friends shouted, scrambling to help. One of them lay flat on the ground, reaching down, grabbing my wrist. I clung to him, my arms burning, my grip slipping. Together, they pulled me up, inch by inch, until I was back on solid ground. I collapsed, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I still have nightmares about that fall, the feeling of weightlessness, the terror of the unknown. But I also remember the hands that pulled me back, the friends who saved my life. Sometimes, survival is a team effort. Story 25, The Gas Leak. I'd just moved into a new apartment, excited for a fresh start. The place was old, but charming, creaky floors, high ceilings, big windows that let in the light. One morning, I woke up with a headache, my mouth dry, my thoughts fuzzy. I stumbled to the kitchen, planning to make coffee, but the smell stopped me, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Gas. I ran to the stove, checking the knobs, but everything was off. I opened the windows, grabbed my phone, and called the fire department. They arrived minutes later, evacuating the building, searching for the source of the leak. They found a cracked pipe in the basement, leaking gas into the walls. The fire chief told me I was lucky. If I'd lit the stove, if I'd stayed asleep a little longer, I might not have woken up at all. Now, I check the stove every night, listen for strange sounds, and trust my nose. I know how quickly danger can sneak up on you, how important it is to pay attention to the little things. Story 26. The Riptide. The ocean has always been my happy place, a world of salt and sun, of endless blue. I grew up swimming, surfing, and feeling at home in the waves. One summer, I was caught in a riptide. It happened so fast, a sudden pull, the water dragging me away from shore. I tried to swim back, but the current was too strong, pulling me further out. Panic set in. I shouted for help, but the waves swallowed my voice. I remembered something I'd learned. Don't fight the current, swim parallel to the shore. I turned, swimming sideways, my arms burning, my lungs screaming for air. The current fought me, but I kept going, stroke after stroke. Finally, I broke free, the water calming, the shore growing closer. Lifeguards met me in the shallows, pulling me to safety. Now, every time I swim, I respect the ocean's power. I know how quickly a moment of fun can become a fight for your life. Story 27. The Stalker. It started with phone calls, silent at first, then heavy breathing, then a voice whispering my name. I thought it was a prank, someone with the wrong number. But the calls kept coming day and night until I stopped answering. Then I started seeing him, a man in a dark coat, standing across the street, watching my apartment. He never approached, never spoke, just stood there, always in the same spot. I went to the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless he threatened me. I changed my routines, took different routes to work, told friends and family what was happening. One night, I came home to find my door ajar, the lock broken. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, every instinct screaming at me to run. I grabbed a heavy lamp, creeping through the apartment, checking every room. He was gone, but the sense of violation lingered. I called the police again, and this time they took me seriously. They set up surveillance, patrolled the neighborhood, helped me install new locks and an alarm system. The call stopped. The man disappeared. I never saw him again, but I still check the locks every night, still glance over my shoulder when I walk alone. I know how quickly safety can vanish, how important it is to trust your instincts. Story 28. The Surgery. I'd always been healthy, never spent a night in the hospital. But then I started having stomach pains, sharp, relentless, impossible to ignore. The doctor ordered tests, then scheduled emergency surgery. I was scared, but I trusted the doctors. The last thing I remember is the bright lights of the operating room, the cold sting of the anesthesia. I woke up in the ICU, tubes in my arms, machines beeping all around me. The surgeon told me I'd nearly died. The appendix had ruptured, spreading infection through my body. They'd operated just in time. Recovery was slow, painful. I spent weeks in the hospital, learning to walk again, to eat, to live. But I survived. Now, I listen to my body, never ignore pain, never take my health for granted. I know how quickly things can change, how close I came to not making it. Story 29. The Blizzard. I was driving home from a friend's house, the snow falling thick and fast. The roads were slick, the world outside my headlights a blur of white. I should have stayed the night, but I just wanted to sleep in my own bed. Halfway home, my car slid off the road, landing in a ditch. I tried to call for help, but there was no signal. The wind howled, snow piling up around the car, the temperature dropping. Now, I carry an EpiPen everywhere. I ask about ingredients, read labels, take nothing for granted. I know how quickly life can change, how important it is to be prepared. Story 31. The carjacking. It was late, the parking lot empty except for my car and a few others. I was unlocking the door when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a man, his face hidden by a hood, a gun in his hand. He demanded my keys, his voice shaking with anger. I handed them over, trying not to make any sudden moves, trying to stay calm. He shoved me aside, climbed into the car, and sped off, tires screeching. I ran to the nearest store, called the police, shaking so hard I could barely speak. They found my car hours later, abandoned on the side of the road. The man was never caught. I was lucky, just a few bruises, a lost car, and a story to tell. But I know now how quickly things can turn, how close I came to not making it home. Story 32. The Mountain Lion. I was hiking alone in the foothills, the sun warm on my back, the world quiet except for the sound of birds and the crunch of gravel under my boots. I rounded a bend and saw it, a mountain lion, crouched on the trail, its eyes locked on mine. I froze, remembering every bit of advice I'd ever heard. Don't run. Make yourself look big. Speak in a firm voice. I raised my arms, shouted, backed away slowly. The lion watched me, its tail twitching, muscles tense. For a moment, I thought it would attack. But then it turned, melting into the brush, disappearing as silently as it had appeared. I stood there, shaking, my heart pounding. I'd come so close to death, so close to being just another statistic. Now, every time I hike, I remember that day. I respect the wild, the unpredictability of nature. I know how quickly things can change. Story 33. The House Fire. It was the middle of the night when the smoke alarm went off. At first, I thought it was a dream, the shrill beeping blending with the fog of sleep. But then I smelled it, smoke, thick and acrid, filling the air. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, the world spinning as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Flames flickered under the door, the heat intense, the smoke choking. I dropped to the floor, crawling toward the window, remembering what I'd learned in school. Stay low, cover your mouth, don't open hot doors. I opened the window, the cold night air rushing in, and climbed out onto the roof. I shouted for help, waving to my neighbors. Someone called 911, and within minutes, firefighters arrived, their lights flashing, their voices calm and steady. They helped me down, wrapped me in a blanket, checked me for burns and smoke inhalation. I watched as they battled the flames, saving what they could. I lost most of my belongings that night, but I survived. Now, I check the smoke alarms every month, keep a fire extinguisher in every room, and never take safety for granted. I know how quickly a quiet night can turn into a fight for your life. Story 34. The Boating Accident. The lake was calm, the sun warm on my face, the boat rocking gently as we fished. It was supposed to be a relaxing day, a break from the stress of work and life. But then the wind picked up, the sky darkened, waves rising out of nowhere. We tried to head back to shore, but the engine sputtered and died, leaving us adrift. The waves grew higher, crashing over the sides, filling the boat with water. We bailed as fast as we could, but it wasn't enough. The boat capsized, tossing us into the cold, churning water. I grabbed a life jacket, clinging to it as the waves battered me. My friend was nearby, shouting, but the wind stole his words. We drifted for what felt like hours, the cold sapping our strength, hope fading with the daylight. Just as I was about to give up, I saw a light, a rescue boat, searching the lake. They pulled us aboard, wrapping us in blankets, checking us for hypothermia. But then I smelled it, smoke, thick and acrid, filling the air. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, the world spinning as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Flames flickered under the door, the heat intense, the smoke choking. I dropped to the floor, crawling toward the window, remembering what I'd learned in school. Stay low, cover your mouth, don't open hot doors. I opened the window, the cold night air rushing in, and climbed out onto the roof. I shouted for help, waving to my neighbors. Someone called 911, and within minutes, firefighters arrived, their lights flashing, their voices calm and steady. They helped me down, wrapped me in a blanket, checked me for burns and smoke inhalation. I watched as they battled the flames, saving what they could. I lost most of my belongings that night, but I survived. Now, I check the smoke alarms every month, keep a fire extinguisher in every room, and never take safety for granted. I know how quickly a quiet night can turn into a fight for your life. Story 34. The boating accidentemia. I recovered, but the experience changed me. Now, I watch every step, respect the wild, and never hike alone. I know how quickly a moment of carelessness can become a fight for your life. Story 37. The train crossing. I was running late, rushing to catch the bus, my mind on a million things. I came to the train tracks, the crossing arms up, the lights off. I looked both ways, saw nothing, and started across. Halfway over, I heard the horn, a train, barreling down the tracks, closer than I'd realized. I froze, panic rooting me in place. At the last second, I dove forward, rolling off the tracks as the train thundered past, the ground shaking beneath me. I lay there, heart racing, the world spinning. I'd come so close to dying, so close to making a fatal mistake. Now, I never rush across train tracks, never take shortcuts, never assume it's safe. I know how quickly a routine day can become a fight for survival. Story 38. The gas station explosion. I was filling up my car, the sun setting, the world quiet. I heard a shout, turned to see a car speeding toward the pumps, smoke pouring from under the hood. The driver jumped out, yelling for help. I ran, grabbing the fire extinguisher, but before I could reach the car, it exploded, flames shooting into the sky, heat washing over me. I dove behind a concrete barrier, the blast ringing in my ears. Debris rained down, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burning fuel. Firefighters arrived, battling the flames, keeping the fire from spreading. I was shaken, but unharmed. Now, I'm more aware of my surroundings, more cautious at gas stations, more respectful of the dangers we take for granted. I know how quickly life can change, how close I came to disaster. Story 39. The final breath. It was supposed to be a simple surgery routine, the doctor said. I signed the forms, changed into the gown, and tried to calm my nerves. The last thing I remember is the anesthesiologist's gentle voice, telling me to count backward from 10. I woke up to chaos. Alarms blaring, nurses shouting, a mask pressed to my face. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, panic flooding every cell in my body. I heard someone say, "We're losing her," and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, the world was quiet. A nurse sat beside me, holding my hand. "You stopped breathing," she said softly. "But you're back now. You made it." I lay there, tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed by the fragility of life. I'd come so close to the edge, so close to never waking up again. Now, every breath feels like a gift. Conclusion: what survival teaches us. These stories are more than just tales of luck or chance. They are reminders of how quickly life can change, how thin the line is between ordinary and extraordinary, between safety and danger, between life and death. For those who have faced the edge and come back, the world is never quite the same. Every sunrise feels brighter, every hug lasts a little longer, every moment is a little more precious. Survival isn't just about escaping death, it's about learning to live with gratitude, with courage, and with the knowledge that every day is a second chance. If you've ever found yourself in a moment where everything could have ended, you know what it means to fight, to hope, to hold on. And if you haven't, let these stories remind you. Life is fragile, unpredictable, and worth cherishing. So check your smoke alarms, wear your seatbelt, trust your instincts, and never, ever take a single breath for granted.